Were they nice?
Nice enough.
Did it hurt?
Just uncomfortable.
How do you feel now?
Tired?
In the increasingly polarized and hostile world we seem to live in, it's frighteningly easy to believe that empathy is a lost art. As defeatist, even pessimistic as that can sound, the current state of discourse has led us to grow accustomed to seeing others reduced to tools and ideas, enemies even, without reflecting on their humanity and the forces that have shaped them. People are written off as misguided or troubled without any thought given to where these troubles came from or how they strayed away from their path. Perhaps even worse is how common it seems for people to ignore issues and injustices simply because they are not personally affected by them, waiting until the pain reaches them personally before making an attempt at understanding. All of that isn't as true as it may seem, though. Humans are empathetic creatures, and this is apparent through their artistic creations. Art has the power to push people in the right direction, and it has the power to heal. Even if such an assertion seems trite, it's a mistake to underestimate this power and the effect it can have on the people who will listen. Art can show people things that cannot be conveyed in any other way. If anything can ease the lack of empathy felt in the world right now, it's art, whether that be poetry or prose, music or illustrations, or of course film. Cinema as a whole can be seen as a vehicle for empathy, or as the beloved late film critic Roger Ebert put it, a machine that generates empathy. In general, the goal of a film is to make the audience feel as if they've lived the experiences of the character on screen and can identify with their struggles. Understanding is the vital foundation to empathy and connection, and this is not a concept alien to cinema. However, some films are teeming with compassion to such a degree that they redefine what empathy in cinema can be. Such films contain empathy in layers. Not only does the audience empathize with the characters, but empathy seems to ooze from the direction and the writing of the film, whether the artists are putting on display something close to their heart or trying to reach understanding of an unknown character through the medium. Characters show compassion towards one another, conveyed through tender moments of human connection. There's a feeling of sensitivity and understanding at every level, and the filmmaker trusts that the audience is capable of extracting these feelings from film. There's a universality to cinematic tactics that transcend literal situation. It's not necessary to relate to the particular conflicts that a character is facing, as long as the film succeeds in conveying the broader emotions and reactions associated with that situation. This can be achieved in several ways, and it's not so much scientific as it is deeply visceral, as can be understood of all art. A film such as 2018's Us and Them demonstrates this somewhat obviously, which can make it a suitable example to point to. Indeed, I do consider the film to be a rather compassionate one that seeks to create genuine understanding for its characters and their situations rather than hollow sympathy. However, there's a blurred line between truly empathetic filmmaking and pure emotional manipulation, so nothing is set in stone or inarguable. After all, how much can be called objective in film and art in general? Us and Them, directed by Rene Liu, follows the tumultuous, uncertain relationship between two struggling lower-class young adults who meet on a train. There are several barriers to being able to relate to this story, as not everyone has experienced poverty, not everyone has a damaged relationship with a parent, not everyone has been in the sort of dramatic romantic relationship that the film centers on, not everyone understands the social nuances of the setting, and so on. It may be obvious to point out that one does not have to have lived the situations portrayed on screen in order to find something to relate to, nor in order to feel compassion towards the characters. But this is a truth that you can never fully know if you don't step outside of your own experiences when viewing art. For some groups, this is a necessarily learned skill, as they may not see their own experiences often represented on screen. For others, there's no shortage of representation, and the idea of stepping outside of art they can directly relate to may not seem as obvious. Seeing these situations related through art is an important component to gaining a greater understanding of their nature. Us and Them follows a decaying romance and is able to deliver the emotional impact of that decay by first showing that romance in an idealistic way, almost to the point of it feeling like a fantasy. Everything from the bold present music to the wondrous winter landscape to the bouncy, oh-so-perfect dialogue conveys this sense of impossible perfection. What things feel like before the cracks become apparent and the color is washed away. The stark contrast between this perfect past and the dreary, washed-out present causes the audience to feel as if something were personally taken away from them. They feel the loss of happiness just as the characters do, as the characters' experiences are reflected through the cinematic techniques used in the film. Tender, genuine moments between characters can be very effective when it comes to instilling empathy, as these moments demonstrate that the characters have empathy towards each other. This is an important component to empathetic cinema, even if a film can very well be empathetic without empathy being directly portrayed on screen. Seeing others have compassion can spark our own desire to be compassionate creatures. Often these cinematic moments of compassion can be unexpected and in fact can be more effective for it. The audience becomes so engulfed by the explicit drama of the situation being shown on screen that a moment of true connection can be a shocking, affecting event. It's impossible to describe the nuances of the relationships of us and them that requires actually watching it, but an example of this can nevertheless be described in the context of the film. There's a point near the end of the film where everything in its power has been done to produce a battered, broken audience, which happens to be the best time to deliver a startling emotional blow. While the film is primarily about the romantic relationship between this couple, lurking in the relative background is a significant source of compassion that is made stronger by its juxtaposition with the decaying romance. A secondary plot follows the male protagonist's father as over time he is effectively abandoned by his son and slowly loses the friends and family that once surrounded him. In a way, the film employs a method that mirrors the aforementioned contrast between the past and present, and it is aware of this comparison. Among the ruins of lost friendships, there's a moment of hope and positivity that also conveys a sense of lifelong hurt and desperation. Despite being estranged from his son, and despite the film's lead not ending up together, the father character extends a compassionate gesture through his son's ex-girlfriend, writing to her, "Take care of yourself, come home anytime when you're tired." Through all of the pain and disappointment, this genuine gesture not only shows that he's empathetic of her troubles, but also strengthens the empathy that the audience feels towards him, knowing all that he's gone through over the course of the film. It's a bittersweet letter full of the pain this character has experienced, yet is understanding of the son's mistakes and hopeful for a healed future, regardless of what connections still remain between the characters of the film. A film that applies similar tactics, perhaps to a greater degree and to greater effect, though paradoxically through more subtle means, is Ilo Ilo by Anthony Chen. The film is set against the backdrop of the Asian financial crisis in Singapore. While the implicit assumption is that there is no time and no space for meaningful connection among rampant economic conflict, the film delivers unexpectedly delicate moments that disprove that assumption. It's easy to get caught up in an every man for himself mentality when everyone is being negatively affected, and it's easy to forget that in such situations, people face personal conflicts that they may internally reduce to be inconsequential, believing personal struggles to be insignificant when compared to the greater issues facing society. This, of course, is easily seen in our modern world at any given time when the great conflicts take precedent in people's minds and the individuals are forgotten, when global tragedy pushes us to ignore our own trauma because there's always someone who has it worse. Ilo Ilo is brimming with small meaningful moments that convey a sense of understanding among characters. Their shared situation at times appears to distance them as they all put on their best attempts at hardened facades in order to combat the heavy negativity of the situation. But these facades are not nearly perfect. Anger, sadness, and desperation still seep through the cracks, leading to honesty that seems to come out of nowhere. The facades that the characters put up are not inhibitors to empathy. In fact, they result from near universal instinct. Even if their internal conflicts remain vague, small details allow for a sense of general understanding and relatability. When watching Ilo Ilo, I was surprised by the apparent sense of nostalgia the film gave me. I was not alive during the time period that the film takes place, nor have I ever lived in the country that it takes place in. It was nostalgia for something I've never actually experienced, demonstrating the feeling of longing delivered to me by the universal elements that bubble up to the surface of the film, surpassing the barriers ostensibly presented by the differences in situation. The situation seems almost inconsequential when compared to the feelings the situation evokes. Through empathy, it all gets boiled down to the depths of emotion we all carry. Whether or not the struggles of the characters are directly relatable, the conflicts they face and the way they face their struggles is universal. The ways they process and express their emotions are greater than their circumstances. It's all a part of being human. When a film presents this expressly human element to the forefront and does so in a nuanced and honest way, it's easy to connect with the characters and feel for them. It's easy to understand them and where they are coming from. Ilo Ilo does this particularly notably when it follows a character acting in what seems to be an irrational way, and then those cracks through the facade begin to form, honesty begins to shine through, and suddenly understanding fills the air. Everyone is in pain, and this pain can drive them to ignore what's inside, but concealing it completely is nearly impossible. Subtleties in dialogue and performances can play a large role in this, as clues can be left to that point towards some understanding of a character's internality, which can easily be at odds with the way they outwardly present themselves. Directed by Eliza Hittman, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always is a film that demonstrates the power of a performance when it comes to revealing just enough to instill empathy, but maintaining a character that keeps so much bottled up and stored away, trying to keep her guard up despite her troubles. The film's two main characters are relentlessly understanding of each other, and outside forces have varying levels of empathy towards those characters and their struggles. It's as if the filmmaker is leading the characters through a chaotic world, reaching through the camera with an invisible hand. You can feel the support as a palpable aura affecting both sides of the camera. In a literal sense, the two main characters only have each other, but there's this implicit presence of another force helping them along the way, unable to directly affect their circumstances, but able to nevertheless demonstrate compassion towards them. The film follows a teenager named Autumn who is pregnant and seeking to terminate her pregnancy. Ironically, when she expresses this desire to a nurse, that nurse attempts to exploit Autumn's sympathy through anti-abortion videos and pamphlets intended to discourage her from pursuing the procedure. Autumn is not dissuaded by this literature and, in the absence of safe, controlled methods of abortion, attempts to induce a miscarriage through supplements and beating her own stomach. It's when she confesses her pregnancy to her cousin and coworker Skylar that genuine empathy enters the scene, starkly contrasting the cold and unsupportive attitude of anti-abortion healthcare professionals in her rural town. Not many words are spoken between Skylar and Autumn, as the latter shows herself to be quiet and keep mostly to herself. However, a lot is communicated nonetheless through the glances between two characters. They convey worry, pain, confusion, and understanding through these glances, establishing that words may not be all that helpful when it comes to revealing what's hidden deep inside these characters. The film remains ambiguous when it comes to the specifics of the pain that Autumn has experienced, but it's through what's left unsaid that it all becomes clear. And in a way, this ambiguity helps when it comes to being empathetic of her situation. It allows people to project their own experiences onto the film, as the emotions expressed are familiar even if the situation itself is kept vague. The camera itself feels empathetic and intimate in the film, revealing the nuances of characters' expressions through close-ups. Through seemingly stoic consonants, the smallest things are revealed through the camera and picked up by the viewer, whether subconsciously or not. A perpetual glint in Autumn's eye seems to serve as a foggy window to her soul, revealing some small amount of what she's keeping bottled up inside her. It's only at a pivotal moment late in the film that we see the tears actually fall, a moment in which we can still only imagine the horrors of Autumn's experiences.
It's okay. want to make sure you're safe, and I want to help you if I can.
Much like with Ilo Ilo, it's the tender moments that come from unexpected places that tend to feel the most empathetic and true. After Autumn snaps at her, Skylar still takes the time to gently apply makeup to Autumn's face, neither of them saying a word except for softly expressed instructions. The camera floats from Autumn to her reflection and then back again, soaking in the surprising lack of tension in the moment. It's a gesture that says, "I understand, let's now move forward," stopping any vitriol in its tracks. Another such moment occurs when Skylar finds herself in an uncomfortable situation with a man, a situation she tolerates only because she and Autumn are hoping the man will lend money to get them home, a situation all too familiar to Autumn and all too familiar to the audience. As Autumn witnesses the scene and sees Skylar's face dripping with clear discomfort, she grabs Skylar's hand and links their pinkies together, a poignant and caring gesture that contrasts with the soft horror of the situation. A similarly subdued look at circumstances not often represented in film is Firstness, directed by Brielle. Brilliant. The film features a friendship between two characters who, while from drastically different backgrounds, connect with one another due to both being part of marginalized groups. One of these characters, Tavi, is a young non-binary child, while the other, Julian, is an ex-convict struggling to find work after being released.
I saw you fall.
What was that?
I saw you fall. On the sidewalk yesterday. Over there.
Oh. Yeah, I did. Tripped.
I saw you.
You saw me?
Even the first interaction between these two characters contains a certain implied empathy, with Tavi declaring to Julian, "I saw you fall." "I saw you," they say, and to that, after an uncertain pause, Julian replies, "You saw me?" This conversation demonstrates the crux of compassion, which is to simply see one another. Up to this point, Julian doesn't expect to be seen by anyone. He floats along like a ghost, dances in a slow, interpretive manner in empty fields, quite literally as if nobody is watching. Tavi is perhaps the first person to acknowledge seeing him unprompted since he's been released from prison, and it's difficult for him to even process the physical act of someone seeing him. And he sees them right back. Both characters lack a clear reference of their places in the world, and thus are lost souls cursed to wander aimlessly through a landscape that seems hostile towards them. But they are able to see each other, and they're able to give each other places in the world, even if only in reference to one another. Tavi's non-binary identity is not even discussed between these two characters, nor really is Julian's job status, yet they both recognize each other to be on the margins of what society deems acceptable, and so they cling to what they do know and understand about one another. The opposite is true of the relationship between Tavi and their father, Keith. Keith is aware of Tavi's identity and has far more exposure to their struggles, but doesn't truly see them. He consistently misgenders them and often seems too wrapped up in his own internal conflict to even begin to try and understand Tavi. And yet there are still clearly flashes of empathy in his synapses in the few instances he interacts with his child in the film, and this imperfect, messy form of empathy is mutual. In one scene, Keith and Tavi are sitting around a dinner table conducting a ritual in which they alternately list off things they are grateful for.
Thank you to my eyes for letting me see.
And Liz for giving me quality time with my child.
Thank you to the sun for giving light, and to the moon for giving darkness.
Thank you to my legs for carrying me around.
Thank you to Julian for falling on the sidewalk. And thank you to my dad for giving me food every morning and every night.
Thank you to my heart.
"Thank you to my eyes for letting me see," Tavi says. Their father plays along, "Thank you to my legs for carrying me around." In these moments, the two are subtly supporting one another. Their little dinner time game seems to have come from the therapy group Keith attends, so Tavi's participation in the activity seems to communicate that they understand their father in some way or another. Keith returns this support by mimicking Tavi's perhaps idiosyncratic interpretation of the exercise, in which they think a part of their own body. Later on, when the two characters cross paths only briefly after wandering aimless in their own ways, they each pause and you can almost see the cogs in their brains turning as each tries their best to understand the other. What separates Firstness from other narratives that center around identity is that the film isn't really about the identity itself or the direct struggles that come along with it. Conflict regarding Tavi's gender is kept only to small instances in which outwardly they seem relatively unbothered. They admit to being thankful for those who gender them correctly, but shrug off friends coming to their defense when they do get misgendered. While the specificity of Tavi's gender is important to who they are as a character, the impact it has is something universal. It's yet another aspect of Tavi that their father cannot see or understand, and it's yet another aspect of Tavi that leads them to be as directionless as they are, untethered from the expectations of those around them. This feeling of being lost is nearly universal and offers an entry point to understanding and empathizing with Tavi's struggles with their gender identity. It's especially important for films like Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, and Firstness to instill empathy, as they portray situations and characters that often have the empathy removed from them in popular media depictions, or have empathy twisted around in insincere ways that have little regard for real lived pain. The films allow the audience to understand the nuances of these circumstances and remind them of the human at the center. It's vital that a diverse variety of situations be represented on screen, as film has the power to induce understanding. It gives the ignored a voice. Empathy and compassion tend to have rippling effects. When characters in a film are compassionate towards each other, when the filmmaker behind a camera portrays their subjects in an empathetic light, the viewer is able to more easily understand the struggles and issues being shown. And as this empathy shows itself through this viewer's words and conduct, it can only spread further. As imperfect as we are, art is able to make us more compassionate, or perhaps is able to reveal the compassion that is inherent within us. It allows us to step into the shoes of others and feel some amount of the weight of their troubles, if only through a two-dimensional screen. It allows us to listen, and it allows us to speak. Art has that power, cinema has that power, and it's something to hold on to as this tumultuous world continues to change.